Hey everybody, this is Atesh and welcome to my new series, Remaking a Song. For the last year or so, I've been recreating some of my favorite solos for both guitar and production practice. In this series, we're going to have a look at how I went about producing and mixing these tunes, and also these songs' latest makeovers in a better mixing environment. A little info before we get started. First of all, I didn't create the whole tracks, I only created the solo parts. And secondly, I didn't intend these to be the exact copies of the originals. I'm still fine with using my own sounds, but just wanted to get a little closer to the original, so when you hear that, it's not out of place. And also, these solos are really challenging, and even though I did my best, I couldn't achieve 100% the same tones and the feeling, and I changed a couple of things here and there, but I think I got a similar result. So let's just jump in and have a look at the project. All right, today we're looking at the solo section from Epiphany by Intervals. It's a gorgeous guest solo from David Maximisic. It's one of my all-time favorite solos. I did this last year. During the first lockdowns, I learned the solo and I couldn't find a good backing track, so I used this opportunity to improve myself a little bit in terms of production and mixing. So I made my own backing track. If you don't know the song, please go ahead and listen to it. I'll wait. All right, so this is my first version I did last year. And when I decided to make this into a YouTube video, I decided I should give it a little bit of a makeup, redo some of the things, change the mix a little bit, change the snares, redid the guitars, change the bass, and remixed it, and this is the result. This was the third full-on production guitar solo cover, so I knew a little bit more by this point in terms of comparing songs. What I do in these projects, I put the songs directly in the project. As you can see, those don't go into the main mix bus. So they go to this bus 11, which is the monitor, and this is my OBS. This way, the songs I put, the previous version and the original song, don't go into this bus. It just goes after that. Let's start with drums. That's what I start with. But I'm gonna go ahead and turn off all the plugins I have on the master bus. I'm gonna get to them later. Here's my drums with no processing on, nothing on the master bus, nothing on the channels, and my parallel compression is muted. And I'm going to turn on all the plugins I put in the channels, tracks. This is unmute the parallel compression. This is what it sounds like. And at this point, I turn on all my plugins on the actual mix bus. And this is what it sounds like. I'm using the Get Good Drums P4 plugin, except for the snare, because the snare in this was a little too violent. The original is a little more of a bouncy, kind of a nicer, like less heavy, so to speak, snare. I'm using a sample by Jordan Valeriot of Hardcore Music Studio because he is the one actually that mixed the song. And I checked the sample and it was actually working pretty all right. So at this point, I turn on all my Master Bus plugins and I go from there on. Okay, so let's have a look at the separate elements. So this is my kick. I have a little bit of an EQ like this. A little bit of compression. A little bit of a tape machine. And it's going into this bus 3 is my parallel compression. Let's see the snare. It already sounds pretty fresh and nice. So what I have is a little bit of an EQ like this, cutting out some ringy frequencies, boosting a little bit low end, high pass, and a little bit of a dip around 294. All right, then I have a little bit of a gate to make it a little, because the original snare is a little shorter. And then I have my virtual mix bus doing some compression here and a little bit more EQ using this SSL type EQ. As you can see, it's not much. It's just a little bit. I mean, the sample has it all. So, and then I have a tape machine on top of that. Doesn't do much of a difference. I'm not actually sending this into a parallel compression. I just have this little bit of reverb. All right, that's my snare. And for these toms, actually what I'm doing is this. It's a multiband distortion that I got from Nolly, who got it from Eric Valentine. So it's a similar method using my own tools. It's the same for the Tom 4. Let's solo that. Let's mute those. So by doing that, I don't need to do any EQing or anything. And on the actual drum bus, what I have is this. This is there, not doing anything, just the using the drive. A little bit of a compression, 3:1 ratio. Not more than 5 dB of gain reduction. And these are on. The mix knob is a little down. And then I have a little more EQ going on, with and without. So that's my drums. Oh, and also what I like using for parallel compression is this Devil Lock by Sound Toys. It's just awesome. I turn it down a little bit because it tends to get a little too loud. And for the snare reverb, I'm using this Space Designer. These are my settings. That's about it for drums. Now, let's have a look at the bass. Now, I played this with a live bass. I didn't do a good job. Also because these were really actually fast-paced Instagram videos, so I didn't really spend that much time on anything when I was first making them. But when I listen to them now, it wasn't good. It was really loose and like not really well played. Timings were off, tones were off, it was noisy. So I used the Loki bass from Solemn Tones, and I went ahead and printed it down. So this was my MIDI file. I bounced it in place, and this is what I get. . 。 . 。 . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . There's just a little bit of an EQ and nothing else. It's not much of a difference, but it makes a big difference when it's combined with the kick. All right, moving on to the guitars. So what I have here is a little bit of a weird combination. I normally don't do this, but this time it worked. I'm combining the Fortin Cali by Neural DSP and Tone for Jason Richardson by Joy Sturgis Tones. They both have a character that actually adds to this style. They're both going on at the same time. I have two instances of Tone for Jason Richardson, one for left and right, same for Fortin Cali, one for left and right. I had a separate project. I recorded all the guitars there, printed them, brought them here. On the tracks themselves, I have nothing going on. And on the guitar bus, I have the multipass. This is just doing a little bit of multiband compression. And I have this EQ. And I have this H comp. What it's doing is actually, this is sidechain to my snare. And every time the snare hits, the guitar ducks a bit. So that's the idea. But I want to show you this on and off. All right, these are my guitars. Now, we're on to the solo. Now, I know I didn't do 100% accurate representation of the solo. I missed a couple of things, but, you know, for this purpose, I think it was fine. I didn't really record it again. What I'm using here for the solo is THU Slate. I have this England amp, a little bit of compression, 7-band EQ, boosting some frequencies there, a phaser, this England amp, this is the Slate's own IR, and some chorus, some EQ, some delay. All right, so, and then I have a channel EQ running through a compressor. I have this tremolo that I'm using to replicate the flutter effect because I have a hardtail guitar. That is just automated. See, just kicks in there and that little bit. And then that's all my guitars. Let's see what I'm doing for the mix bus. So this is very, again, gnarly. Changed things a little bit. Instead of 12K, I boosted the 15K a little bit. But I'm going easy on this stage because I don't think Jordan did a lot of EQing on the mix bus itself. I think it's more in the individual elements. But I'm boosting some frequencies, very reminiscent of Nolly. Just a little more shy, trimming it down a little bit. And then, of course, it's running into this SSL type compression. Which is also very gnarly again. Normally I put a tape machine, but this time it wasn't really necessary. It made things a little bit too loaded. This song has this kind of light feeling to me, so I turned it off. And then I have a little bit of this fresh air, boosting some high air, very little mid-air. Now, I have this match EQ, which is a really handy tool to use, especially in projects like this. I wouldn't suggest using this for your own original compositions. This thing actually listens to your song and then the reference, and like it applies this EQ curve on it, so it just sounds a lot closer. Now, this isn't something I use for my music, for my original, but in this case, especially for an Instagram video, it was actually really, really useful. So I'm not gonna turn everything on and off, but let's see what this match EQ does. On. And off. So yeah, that's a big difference. So what I'm gonna do now is actually I'm gonna compare it to the original as it's playing. So when I solo this, what we hear is actually the song itself. None of these plugins affect that. That's just by itself. All right. So I'm gonna start with mine and then switch to the original. So, as you can see, it's not completely the same, which wasn't the point. The point was to get it to a ballpark that feels a little familiar, because if I turn this off and we hear the song, it's not that close, which would be fine. I would be fine with that. But like this one extra step actually and my last plugin in the chain is this Ozone Elements, which I really love using. It makes basic mastering so easy. It has this master assistant function. It listens to your song and it suggests things. So I have just a little bit of this going on. It suggested me that. And this limiter. And that's basically it. Now, again, I want to make clear that I wasn't really going for a full replication of this tune. I just wanted to feel a little familiar. If I were doing a detailed job, if I was really trying to copy the sound, then I would take other measures. I would go in and change the kick, for example, work on the guitars a little more and all sorts of stuff. But I think this feels fine. It still sounds similar to the original, but it kind of feels like it's played by some other band, which is totally fine. It feels a little more me. But yeah, let's give it a full listen. So what I want to do is compare my first version to the original. So this was my first version. I'm going to play the first version and switch between the original. And now I'm going to compare my first version to the new version. I'm happy with this result. This is totally fine to put on Instagram. One thing I like to mention is this trickery of using a mastered tune to compare to your tune, because now you have to mix and master to get it closer to this version. But I like that it's a more result-oriented method, which works fine for me. Even for some of my songs, I use this method. Not to compare, I don't drag things inside the project and compare my songs to them, but I put the mastering plugins on and I want to see the end result from the beginning. So if I can, I use with these plugins on. So if you're doing this, please be careful and don't be so harsh on yourself. If you can't get it right, remember, this is just someone else's work. We don't want to copy exactly everything. It's just getting it to a ballpark. So this is it for this episode. I hope you like this. Let me know if you have any questions or if you want to know more about any part of this project. I'm going to do more of these videos. See you in the next episode. Thanks for joining in. Stay safe. Until next time.